Virtuous speech between two people who disagree. That is what I would like to see in my videos and in these conversations between Christians and the LGBTQ community. We need education, we need understanding, and we need to have virtuous dialogue and understand that we're not going to agree on everything in the end. One of the people that I found was really, really good for this was someone named Sean McDowell, who is a Christian apologist and often, I think, does a really good job of navigating these two discussions. So, today, what I am going to do is react to a video that he put out a while back where he's actually in dialogue with a lesbian YouTuber on, the questions of sexuality and various other things like that. So join me. I hope that you would like, share, and subscribe and follow me for more content like this for the month of Pride. Thank you so much.
You're going to find today's interview very fascinating. My guest is Arielle Scarcella. She has a huge YouTube channel. She's a content producer, and in our interview describes herself as one of the original lesbians producing content on YouTube, going back about a dozen years.
Ooh.
A viewer of mine reached out a while ago and said, "Hey, I'm not sure if you've heard of Arielle, but she's having conversations with people who see the world differently. I think she'd be a fascinating guest." So I reached out to her and I said, "Hey, would you be willing to come on the channel of a Christian professor and just talk about faith and culture and have a civil conversation?" She instantly replied back and said yes. So we talk a little bit about her views of politics, who she thinks Jesus was and wasn't. We talk about religious liberty. But the big goal is just to have a civil conversation on issues that matter. And I think we accomplished that. So to be honest with you, if you're a member of the LGBTQ community, you might get on my website and find some stuff that bothers you to a degree because I'm a conservative Christian. If you're a conservative Christian and you get on Arielle's channel, you might feel the same. Realize the goal of this is to reach across just two different communities, two different people who see the world differently, and see if we can have a civil conversation. And not only is it civil, it was fun. I learned a ton and appreciate that Arielle would come on. Now, before you start watching this, last thing, I asked most of the questions because this is on my channel. But as we get to the end, I asked Arielle, I said, "Hey, if you have any questions for me, think about it, and then you can ask them at the end." And she asked me a fascinating question I didn't see coming, and I gave my best response. So don't tune out before the end, or if you have to,
I got
come
you.
back to it and don't miss that. And if you value civil conversation and just find this helpful, whether you're a Christian or not, or wherever you're from, please consider sharing it with somebody. Enjoy this conversation. Can a Christian professor and a
Yeah, so as I mentioned, he cares about the exact same thing that I care about. So we're trying to navigate these discussions in virtuous ways. And I hope that me and Sean and others who are engaging in these same kinds of discussions can sort of be a light to the LGBTQ community to realize that, we're not, I mean, to give an exaggerated picture in order to make a point, we're not all the Westboro Baptist Church. We're not all ridiculous as them when it comes to this kind of issue. So
lesbian YouTuber have a civil conversation? Well, you are about to find out. My guest today is Arielle Scarcella. She is a YouTube rock star. And Arielle, you first came on my radar when one of my viewers said, "Hey, I've noticed this YouTuber. She has very different beliefs than you have, but she's having civil conversations with people who see the world differently. I bet she'd come on your channel."
So this is a side tangent, but I love the fact that he's also a nerdy Christian. You see the like Spider-Man in the back and the Thanos gauntlet. I'm sorry, but I love that.
Couldn't figure out how
I
to
love that.
do. My high school son is like, "Dude, just send her a message on Instagram." I was like, "That's a good idea." Reached out within like, I don't know, an hour. You're like, "Sure." So
Yep.
thanks for coming on the show with a Christian professor.
Thank you. Thank you for being a Christian professor. Thank you for living your truth. Even though that's something liberals say. I should say leftists say. But I don't think I'm a leftist. I think I'm a liberal. I'm a classic liberal. It's
Okay.
like, let me live my life. Don't tell me how to live my life. Don't take my money. That's it.
Well, we're gonna get
That's
into that.
liberal, right?
Yeah, I'm really interested in just what you
Yeah.
believe, why you believe it, your story, your experience.
I am open to you. I am open to the world. I mean, there's very little I shy away from. I don't think there's anything I shy away from, to be honest. But
Well,
I think you found the right person for this job. We'll just say
good.
that.
Well, part
So
of the fun
I'm
is
all in.
you're
Let's go.
from New York. I'm from California, so that even adds another extra
We got this going on here, right?
for different reasons. I love it. Well, why
Right.
don't you just, if my audience doesn't know who you are, and I noticed at the time of this interview, you have over 700,000 YouTube subscribers, so clearly you are rocking in that vein. But
But
how,
you're doing well too. You got 100,000.
well,
That's great. That's
I
excellent.
appreciate that.
That's
It,
true.
it's coming along. So if you don't mind,
Excellent. Yeah.
introduce yourself, assuming that probably a decent number of my viewers may not be familiar with you.
Yeah. So my name's Arielle. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I'm very much gay. And I've been making videos on YouTube for over 12 years. I'm like the OG lesbian of YouTube.
Wow.
But over the last 3-4 years, I've been like at odds with the more left-leaning political side of the spectrum. And then 2 years ago, I came out as leaving the left, and I talk about mainly culture and politics now. More culture than anything, but how politics affects culture and vice versa. Beforehand, I was talking mainly about like sex education and like being gay and stuff like that. More like comedy, and I'm like, okay, I'm too old for not that you can be too old for comedy, but I was like, I guess I like a wore myself out in that department, and I was like, let me talk about some more controversial stuff, deeper issues, like with people like yourself.
Yeah, I do think it's important, and you're definitely never too old for comedy. I could never imagine being too old for comedy. Um, but it is important too because I've done research on I did a presentation for one of my college classes on Christian sexual ethics, particularly toxic Christian sexual ethics. And so I do find that it is extremely important to have sex education, even with that in relation to the LGBTQ community, because, like I said, we need to be able to understand it, and we need to be educated on these sorts of things. And so you can definitely appreciate her for that sort of thing.
So if you recall, what were some of the first things that got your attention that made you think, okay, wait a minute, I'm not at home with the left? Like, do you remember an experience or a story or something that happened, or a few of the things that just started to make you, that kind of cracked that door open, so to speak?
There was a bunch of things. I would say one of the first things was how they were treating President Trump. And I say this as somebody who didn't vote for him the first time around.
Okay.
I remember I was hanging out with one of my Jewish friends, and I say that specifically because it's important in the conversation, because he's a minority. And I mean, he is a minority, but like, the way the leftists use it. And I remember I was like rolling my eyes about him talking about Trump, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, so why don't you like him? And I was like, well, I just don't. Blah. And he's like, that's not an answer. And I was like, oh, like SHIT. I was like, wait, am I allowed to curse on here? Probably not. I was like, wait, why don't I like him? Like, there's something that I was like either I was told to not like him or I was convinced, but I don't have an actual reason. That doesn't make sense. It was a red flag for me. So
Fair
that was
enough.
like the first red flag, that I was being conditioned to think a certain way.
And by the way, I will keep in mind, I'm not usually a political person. I care more. I know politics is kind of everywhere, so it's really hard to avoid it if you even want to avoid it, or if you should avoid it. And those are conversations we can have. But I usually am not a political person. I usually touch on theology, philosophy, reasoning with people, that sort of thing. And obviously being nerdy, hence the name Nerdy Christian. So I usually don't navigate political discussions. But I was too young to vote, and too young to have a political opinion, in some sense. So I didn't really care. But yeah, I definitely found that people could not actually give you a reason as to why they didn't like Trump, right? Like the evidence for why they disliked him. They just didn't. And, she speaks to that. Very interesting there.
Without even realizing why.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was like my first red pill moment. But just from the culture perspective of things, all the hypocrisy, I would say it was mainly for me about control. I continuously, consistently felt controlled by leftists. And it was very reminiscent of abusive relationships that I've had with women in the past. And I've
Mm,
spoken about this publicly as well. If you look, and I made a video about it too, if you look at the characteristics of abusive relationships, we're talking about emotional, verbal, and I guess in sometimes, some ways physical too, like they're burning down buildings and stuff, beating people up for having different beliefs. But majority of what I'm talking about was verbal harassment and emotional abuse, mental abuse. If you look at a chart, like from like psychology.com or something, it dictates, it was like a pie chart, and it was all the different ways you can be emotionally manipulated and abused. And and it was all talking about relationships, like romantic relationships.
Interesting.
But every single piece of the pie also made sense with leftists and how my relationship felt with people on the left.
mm,
So it was, whether it was they were trying to control your finances, if they disagreed with you, they try to get you fired from your job, holding money over your head, you know, saying who you could or could not follow, who you could and could not be friends with.
mm,
That's another abusive tactic. Relationships, right? An abusive boyfriend or girlfriends. I don't want you hanging out with them. I don't like them. Like, who the hell are you to tell me who to hang out with, type of thing? It doesn't affect you, right? That's an abusive, segregating somebody so that you can control them is abusive. Every single one of these things was happening. And I started realizing that about 3 years ago, I would say.
Mm.
And then I just started, I got to the point where I spoke to my friend Tim Poole and my friend Sydney, who's from Australia. And I was like, I need help. I don't know what to do, but I can't like allow myself to be treated this way anymore. And my friend Sydney's like, you need to make a video about leaving. Like, you're done with them. You don't have to come to the right. People are going to assume that, but you need to make a video. And I was like, I need help writing it. And they helped me write it. And it went
mm.
viral. And I was like, okay, well, that's done.
Sure.
Yeah,
And I just
yeah.
sat back and I hoped for the best. I really didn't know what was going to happen. I really didn't. And little by little, Dave Rubin found me, Ben Shapiro found me.
Mm,
Steven Crowder reached out to me. I had an
mm.
interview with him maybe a day after the video went viral. I was actually in Australia, and I had to wake up at like 4 a.m. to do a video where he is in Dallas. Yeah, that's where I'm at now. Now it's like I would say I'm probably a moderate classic liberal, but I lean conservative on certain issues.
Mm.
But it's more, for me, it's more about the controlling aspect.
Okay.
Because if there's a lot of control on the right, I'm not for that either, right? So
Okay.
it's like live and let live. Leave me alone.
Very, very interesting.
I
Now,
hope that wasn't like a long, drawn out.
no, this is great. I would just want to hear your story and your experience. Now, you still describe yourself, as far as I'm aware, as a part of the LGBTQ community.
I will say I will definitely agree with her. I plan to make a video about this, but something that I don't want is to be bullied into agreeing with you. Like, that just seems so dumb and problematic, and if there were I mean, to some extent that there are, Christians who are trying to bully people into Christianity, whether that was slavery, right, or something else, if that's what a Christian is going to do, then we should denounce that, right? And so I want to be consistent and say, like, look, if I don't want to be bullied into agreeing with you, I want to be convinced, right? I want to be discussed. Um, discussing the issues and come to that conclusion. I don't want to be bullied into coming to your conclusions. And so it's interesting that she's noticing things that would get people, like me or Sean or others canceled if we said them. I think I this was a while back. So don't quote me on this, but I think I remember her being in a conversation with a group of people, and they were mentioning like, and she was mentioning like trans people she was interacting with, saying that basically if you would not have relations with a trans individual, then you're being transphobic and I don't know, hateful and all these sorts of things, and how that's basically ignoring consent and all these sorts of things, and how someone was basically attempting to bully her into having relations with a trans person. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't stay with a group that wanted to do that with me either. But don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. And I know that there have been discussions about this because trans people will occasionally, uh, which is understandable because they're afraid, and I get that, and they shouldn't be afraid, but they will hide the fact that this is the case, and then do the deed or about to or whatever, and the person eventually finds out and freaks out or whatever. um I just think that people need consent, obviously, so people need to be aware enough of the situation in your situation in order to be able to give a valid yes. uh, and I would agree with that. So, but basically to say I agree, I've noticed the same thing she's noticed. And that's very interesting.
But I see a lot of people as I was just searching through giving critique to you. Is it because of
Right.
the critique and newer positions that you've taken, or is there something else going on that I missed?
I would say that's definitely a big part of it. But I would say it was starting before I even became like publicly out about supporting President Trump and being more conservative with politics. Um, it started when when I began criticizing, I would say, the trans movement, because it went from 0 to 100 with that movement very quick, and I was not for it. I was very lenient in the beginning and understanding, and I still am with certain issues in the trans community. But as anybody that is not a leftist or is a leftist even knows, even though they might not be like completely fully self-aware of it, once you go against the grain, you're going to be outcast forever, right?
Mm.
So once I started critiquing, and the goalposts are constantly shifting, right? So it's further and further to the left. So no matter what you do, it's like you can't be perfect until they, bring the next social justice cause your way and you have to agree with it. Then you're perfect again. So I stopped
Mm,
agreeing with some of the things that they were saying, and I was like, no, this doesn't make sense because this, and this. And sorry, my phone started ringing. Spam. And I started disagreeing with them, and they obviously were not happy because they could no longer control me. That's when it first started. But then when I became public about promoting, believing in President Trump and what he stood for, and actually did my research, that just created a whole new influx of hate. But also it brought me a lot of support, which I didn't know was going to happen. A lot of people say, "Oh, you're a grifter." It's like, how could I have known? Honestly,
yeah, and that's really important to know. I think I did watch a video with her, and I would encourage you guys to look up a different YouTube channel called the Offensive Tranny. But I believe her and the Offensive Tranny have both made videos about Matt Walsh's documentary, for example, What is a Woman? And it was interesting to see how, the trans community hated on that documentary. And granted, that documentary low key annoyed me too. And it wasn't because of the people, it was because of Matt and not the people that Matt was responding to in a lot of cases. But uh, it was interesting to see how these two were actually a little more supportive of that documentary than a lot of other people were. Uh, so I definitely appreciate people who, you know, uh, maybe she would say have kind of breaking out of control of the left, but I would say more generally are nuanced in their approaches. So they are able to consider different perspectives and take nuances and understandings from those perspectives in order to craft theirs. It might not fit perfectly into here or there, but it's theirs and it's important too. So, and people often have a hard time dealing with the fact that people have their nuances. But again, if we're going to have a good dialogue and stuff, we need to be able to understand that. So.
you don't know what's going to happen when you do those types of things. You're hoping for the best, of course, but you don't know.
Now, this is a question just purely out of curiosity. How many would you say within the LGBTQ community would vote Republican versus Democrat, support Trump or not? And I'm not asking you to make a case for him. I would have
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
assumptions
Just
looking in,
statistic wise, what I think.
but would it be a I would think it'd just be a significant minority, but is that
I
true?
think it's well, I think it's more people every day that are being red pilled,
Oh,
that are seeing.
okay.
I mean, just speaking from a minority's perspective. Like there was a video yesterday of Hillary Clinton in New York. Um,
By the way, just random thing. I don't mean to keep interrupting the video. This was made. When was this video made originally? Okay, so this video was made a year. That was a year ago. Oh, wow. I would have. This video would have fit perfectly 2 or 3 years ago. That's insane. Okay. Well, yeah, it's not that old. I was about to say, yeah, guys, this video is like a couple years old. So, but no, it's okay. All right, I was not expecting that. Okay, but yeah, the video is not super recent, so um, keep that in mind too as you're watching. Obviously,
walking from her hotel or walking to her hotel to her car or whatever, and people were booing her. Did you see this video? It went viral.
I heard about it. I didn't see it.
And there was, if you look at the video, every single person in that video that was booing her was a minority. They were either black, Hispanic. There was like I would say mostly Hispanic people. It looked like maybe one white person, a few women, and I think that says a lot. Like when New Yorkers that are minorities are pissed at you, or when gay people are pissed at you, you
Okay.
effed up. Like you messed up
Okay.
because we're usually very lenient because we know the struggle, right?
Okay.
So when we're being taken advantage of, when we find that out,
Interesting.
is not good for you.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned some of your concern with the trans movement. I have some concern about it. And I've always thought it's interesting that you have Christians and lesbians coming from a very different perspective, but
Agreeing on
share
things.
concerns about
Yes.
some of the trans movement. So tell me, why did you part ways at that point? What were some of the things that you saw that you're like, time out, I can't go with this movement?
What were some of the things? I mean, could I know I can't curse on the channel, but I'm gonna say the word penis because I don't know
That's
how
fine.
else to say it. But when they started telling me that in order to be a proper lesbian, I had to accept trans
okay.
women as real women
Mm,
in the biological sense, meaning that I would have to like date a trans woman and
yeah.
give oral sex to a person with a penis. Like I was just like, no, that's like not what lesbian means to me. Like it can be, it's fine if that's what it means to you. Again, the libertarian stance, but don't tell me how to live my life. Don't tell me what it means for me because it doesn't mean that. Well, a trans woman is a woman. A woman sometimes has a penis, and if you're a lesbian, you like women. And it's like, well, yeah, but lesbians don't like all women. I'm not attracted to every single woman that walks down the street.
Right.
You know, and trans women are trans women. Like that's a very important, prefix, is that the word, descriptor. Yeah, that comes into play. Like why is the word trans there? Because there's something biologically different about them.
Mm,
And I would say that was like my main thing. And then after that it just started snowballing from there. Now they're saying that biological women should be competing in sports against biological males, which again I was for, and I still am for in certain cases. Like if you're somebody like Jazz Jennings, who did not, I think, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, did not experience any male puberty. Like they went on hormones and they went on puberty blockers, and testosterone blockers rather, like very, very early. Somebody like that, like Jazz, in my opinion, she has no biological advantage against a biological female
hmm.
because she doesn't have that testosterone in her body in the way a biological male would if he went through male puberty. But so I was for it in the beginning, and I even had an interview with Fallon Fox, who's a trans woman MMA fighter or boxer, or I think she's MMA. And at the time, like science always changes, right? At the time, science, this was like 5 years ago, science said that she didn't have an advantage. Now it says she does. So my stance on that has changed, which is crazy, right? It's crazy to just look at science and be like, wow, I can think differently now. No, if you're a leftist, whatever you believe, no matter what the science says.
That is super interesting. What are my thoughts here? So I would actually agree in part. Let me give an example. So I'm a huge wrestling fan, right? And so love wrestling. I've been watching it for years now. But one of the things from as a WWE fan in particular, I mean, that was my introduction to wrestling was WWE. One thing I've missed as a WWE fan is particularly starting to be a fan in 2016. What I've missed is men versus women, right? You know, if you go back to early 2000s or whatever, or even just like maybe 2009 or 10, you still had stuff like this where you had even the late 90s where you had like China, like who won the Intercontinental Championship, right? You had you had Mae Young, who's like this really old woman getting like slammed through tables and stuff. And she wanted it, right? Like this is all consensual and everything, obviously, and she wanted it, and it was fun for her and fun for the Dudleys. And the Bubba Ray Dudley, one of the tag team members of the team that put it through the table, have said that Mae Young got the Dudleys over, which is to say that Mae Young is the reason why the Dudley boys are so popular and were able to pick up traction. So, you know, that's something I miss. You know, Beth Phoenix, Edge's wife currently, wrestled in the Men's Royal Rumble in 2010. I believe it was 2010. Yeah, because 2010. Yeah, because CM Punk was involved in that with the whole straight edge society stuff. Might have been 2011, but I'm pretty sure CM Punk was involved with the Nexus at that point. Anyway, so that's something I've missed, and so we've got that. Excuse me. But that is something in wrestling, particularly in WWE, that I've missed. You can see intergender matches elsewhere in wrestling, but that is something I've missed. But of course, you know, one thing we'll have to consider since she brought this up is, and since I brought up wrestling, is what do you do, for example, with Nyla Rose, who is a transgender woman competing against women for the women's championship in AEW. I like Nyla Rose. I think I'll say the correct pronoun. She's a amazing wrestler. I think that she's had great matches with females, and because I'm on in the sense I'm okay with a man wrestling a woman in wrestling, especially because wrestling is just a different sport than so many other sports. You know, I'm okay with Nyla Rose being trans then in this sense, but it's still a dilemma, right? In some regards. So very interesting stuff there.
Now, you had some concerns. You did a video recently on sports and trans athletes competing in sports.
Yeah.
I did an entire interview with a professor who did his doctoral dissertation on the biological differences between men and women. He actually said there's 6,000 differences from bone structure to blood circulation.
Wow, I was not aware of
size,
this.
hand size, right?
Yeah, exactly. All that stuff adds up. So that's my concerns, just out of fairness and having my wife who competed in college sports and got a scholarship. Like, there's a lot of things. And my daughter. What's the heart of your concern? Is it the same, or do you have any other concern you would add to that with the sports question?
I think I think that's my main concern. I think it's that we're taking away trophies, scholarships, world records from females, right? Just yesterday, Leah Thomas, for a trans woman, a swimmer from University of Pennsylvania. I just filmed this before our interview. And I say she because I respect people's gender identities, but I can also understand biological differences, right? People are going to get on me for saying she, but it's like, no, I'm going to respect the person, but also recognize reality. Like, you can do both. So she won the 500 meter, I guess, freestyle. I don't know anything about swimming. Freestyle, whatever. And it was interesting to watch because I think the pendulum is starting to shift. Well, it's been starting to shift more to the right. It's starting to swing back hard the other way because we went way too far left. The University of Pennsylvania posted the video of Leah winning. I'm assuming thinking they were going to get like a lot of praise for it. Like, wow, yes, trans women in sports. Yes, trans rights. That's not what happened on Twitter. It was really interesting. People were like not having it.
I mean, it's Twitter though.
Majority of people were like, congratulations to, I think the girl's name was Catherine, maybe. who was like the rightful owner, the rightful winner. She came in second place, but she was really the first place winner. A lot of people were critiquing Leah Thomas, obviously, for being, I think she was like 460th ranked in men's, and then she was like on, HRT for a year or 2 years, and now she's like first place in women's, and it's like, that doesn't add up, does it? Like, so she was getting a lot of hate, which I don't think hate is the answer, but I think critique is the answer. And we have to sit back and be like, well,
Agreed.
why are sports sex segregated in the first place? Not everything is sex segregated, right?
That's right.
But certain things are. So the question is why? Why? Because of safety, because of biological advantages. That's the only reason why. We have to make it as fair as possible.
Love it. I think I can agree. I can agree wholeheartedly with you on that. As much as you're comfortable, you can just deflect this and we can move on. But obviously, a Catholic family going the direction that you've gone.
Yeah.
Some of those dynamics, like maybe how your family responded. And I ask because I deal with a lot of kids who will experience same-sex attraction. They try to navigate this in their Christian families. And I'm trying to help parents love on their kids while holding on to what they believe is true. So I'm just curious your experience there.
I came out when I was 19, and my parents were 100% fine with it. My mom had laughed. My brother came out 5 minutes after I came out. We're both gay. And and then I've never felt like after I came out, I was fine. I felt I was scared before doing it, not because I thought my parents and family wouldn't accept me. I knew that they would. I was more that I was having a problem accepting myself for some reason. Looking back, how dumb that was. One of the things my dad actually told me after I came out to him, and I had said to, I basically said to him I was scared, I was accepting myself, and he said to me, "Why would God create you this way just to damn you?" And I was like, "Ooh." I was like, "That's it. That's what I needed to hear." If you're created in God's image, or regardless, we're proven at this point, scientifically it's proven that we cannot fix this. We cannot change this. So why would God or the higher power or the universe create something, just to shame it, if that makes sense? And I guess a Christian faith would say, well, it's temptation, maybe, or original, like, I really don't know what they would say at this point. I haven't been involved in the religion in so long. But that's my understanding of what their stance would be on it, I think, right?
Do you want to know what I think, or do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, you can tell me what you think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Scripturally, we have creation, Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 3 would be what we call the fall, and that all of us are broken in different fashions, not living and being the way God wants us to. So, yes, God made every single person. Your race is irrelevant to being made in God's image. Your biological sex is irrelevant to this. Your socioeconomic status, level of intelligence, in the womb, out of the womb. Every single human being is made in God's image. But when sin entered into the world, we've also been broken. And that manifests itself in very, very different ways.
Okay.
So
I could see that. I could see people believing in that.
So it's taking both those into consideration for a lot of Christian theology. So really part of the Christian message is that, like Jesus says in Mark 7, or Paul in Romans 3, it's like we are all miserable sinners. We have infinite value because we're made in God's image, but our hearts are broken, turned against the Lord, and we need to repent. So it's not the kind of message to me that's like, hey, let's invent a message that makes you feel good. Because it basically says all of us have sinned and turned against God.
Right. And as long as I feel like as long as it's not targeting a specific group of people, it's not something that I'm going to condemn.
Yeah, because and there's a couple different things to point out here. The condemnation of God does not target a particular group of people. It's not specific. It's towards everyone. This is all of mankind. And so God is not creating a person to condemn them. He is creating a person. The New Testament says he hopes that all would be saved. It's God's will that all would be saved. But of course, with considerations such as free will, other factors and considerations involved, such as, like he mentioned, the fall. We're not perfect, and so we need to repent of our sins and turn to Christ. And so God making us does not entail that he wants to condemn us, of course, and, but nor does it entail that he approves of all of our actions. So and so no, we're not condemning a specific group of people in the sense that we're targeting, right? It's the sense that God's decree is upon everyone. Everyone will be dealt differently depending on context and knowledge and various other things, and we could get into that. But yeah, it's not a I'm going to create a gay person so that I can send them to hell. That's not that's not how this works. Um, so I would agree with Dr. Sean, and her comments in response to that are helpful.
You know what I mean? If like the message is like, okay, we're all sinners and we can all do better, I think that's a great message. I don't agree with what's considered a sin
Sure.
necessarily,
Yeah,
Sure.
but I
sure.
think it's good that we're treating everybody equally. I could agree with that.
Yeah,
Well, that is definitely a biblical message that either
Yeah,
Greek or Jew, male nor female,
right. And
all are
that's
one in
yeah, I
Christ.
get I
That we
100%
are
get behind that. Yeah.
we're all sinners in that sense. Do you think, I'm curious, sometimes when I speak with people who call themselves Christians and gay, and then others who aren't Christians, they'll make the
Mm.
distinction. Some will say, Sean, it's your theology that you hold and your position about marriage that is hateful in itself. You cannot be loving towards me unless you change your theology. Other people say, look, you hold this historic view about the nature of marriage, but as long as you are gracious and you're kind and you treat me a certain fashion, you can still be loving. So, would the heart of your concern be the position that the church holds, or the manner in which the church holds it, or both?
that is such a important and clarifying question. Thank you, Dr. Sean. We're often told we're homophobic simply for holding the position and not for how we treat you. And I find that to be very unfortunate, but let's hear what she has to say.
The manner in which they hold it. Because as far as I'm concerned, if I don't like what a church is saying, I can go to another church. You know what I mean? I can go to a religion or just make my own religion up. Not like not that I'm like, "Oh, I believe in the sky." I mean, you can, but what I'm saying is you can pick apart different religions and what works best for you, which is what I do, right? I think that's helpful. I don't think that a church should be able to get into legal issues. That's where I have an issue with. If somebody's religious beliefs are messing with my legal rights, then I'm gonna have an issue with it.
Okay.
If you want to believe what you want to believe in, this is America, go for it. If you want to believe that I'm a sinner and I'm gonna die and I'm gonna go to hell, okay. Like you're allowed to believe that. Like who the hell am I? Who the hell am I to tell you what to believe in? I don't think it's a healthy belief, but that's on you to figure out. Not my monkey, not my circus, as we say. My thing is, if your religion is impeding, like I said, is impeding on my human rights to live, what's the Declaration of Independence say? Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. If you're impeding on those things, then I'm gonna have a big issue with it. But I don't think most religions these days do, unless it's Islam and you're in the Middle East. Let's be real, but nobody wants to talk about that.
Mm, that listen, dog, she over here throwing shade. I would, I would probably agree. I don't really want the government to tell an entire group of people who they can and cannot marry. Um, which I guess is a political comment. Ugh. But um, I definitely don't want the government telling people who they can or cannot marry, especially on the basis of religious grounds when the attempt should be to be uh, uh like out of those sorts of discussions. You know what I mean? I think that Christians can still hold a theological perspective on marriage, a theologically conservative perspective on marriage, and recognize that for Paul, for example, and the other biblical authors, um, the government was not a part of that theological message on marriage. So enforcing that into politics really has never made sense to me, and continues to not. So I would agree with both of them.
I've seen you
But
talk.
yeah, I mean, I don't have issues with Catholics or Christians. I really don't. Like, I think the majority of them don't care at this point. And if somebody does, I feel like the worst thing that I've heard is, well, I just think a man and woman should get married, not a woman and a woman. It's like, okay, and so don't get married to a woman if you're a woman. Like, that's your belief and that's your right, but just don't impede mine. And we're talking about morality here. It's not the same as saying that, oh, well, I'm a pedophile and I can't help my attraction to kids, which is also true. This is something that these people can't help. Morally, that's a different argument, right? Morally, I can't stand by that. But to me, being gay, it's always been a woman attracted to a woman, a man attracted to a man. There's nothing morally, in my opinion, wrong with that. Two consenting adults. So, and that goes back to ancient Rome.
Sure.
There was like homosexuals all over the place. I'm sure before then, cavemen. I'm sure if they couldn't find a girl. I don't know.
So what would your take be if you have really a live and let live approach of when like questions of religious liberty come up, like a baker or a florist who says, I'll serve gay people, but I have concern with baking a cake that celebrates a same-sex union because
I agree with you. I agree with your stance on that. I think I don't think I would have understood it beforehand until I became a fan of Trump and more understanding of what freedom actually means. I am personally, like, if this happened in my real life, I'd be like, bye. I'm gonna just go to, I'm just gonna go to a different baker.
sure.
Like that, it's really it would be that simple for me. But I can understand if somebody lives in the middle of nowhere and then that's the only baker that they have and they want to celebrate their gay wedding, whatever. I can understand that they would get upset. But I still
Context matters.
it's not wrong that they're getting upset, but it's also not wrong of the person who doesn't want to be forced to do something they don't believe in.
Yeah, and that's kind of harkening back to what I said before. I don't want to be necessarily forced. I don't want to be bullied. I want to be convinced. But yeah, go ahead.
It would be the same as if you told somebody, like, if I own a bakery and you wanted to come in my bakery and you wanted a cake, you were you were an actual white supremacist and wanted like a cake, you were going to a KKK rally and wanted me to write, I love Nazis on a cake. And I was like, nah, I'm not really cool. How is that any different? Talking about coming from the law specifically, there's not much difference there, right? You're telling me to do something I don't want to do. I shouldn't be forced to do it. Just like masking and vaccines, like my body, my choice. This is my expression, my choice. My business, my choice. I don't agree with it, obviously, because I'm like, okay, you want to celebrate your gay wedding, go ahead, make a cake. But I don't think people should be forced, obviously.
I think you and I are going to have a lot in common on that one, and especially the baker in Colorado. If I remember correctly, it was like a 5-minute walk. I don't even think it was a drive to another bakery that would make the cake designed for the same-sex union.
Right.
But this gay couple was like, no, this cake is going to. And he was sued by the Colorado, what is it, like the Commission of Human Rights in Colorado, sued again, won at the Supreme Court, like a third time on a trans issue. What do you think motivates people to...
Wait, who won, the gay couple or the baker?
So the baker was sued 3 times by a gay, not the same exact couple. There were different cases against him. And last I checked, he's in the middle of the third, won the first 2. It's dragged on for about a decade.
So the baker won the first 2.
The baker won the first 2, yes.
Interesting. Okay.
But I did an entire show interviewing him, and he was like, look, I don't do cakes for Halloween because of my convictions. I have concern with Halloween. I wouldn't, it's not just targeting this issue, and he would serve gay people. He goes, he views his making cakes as an artistic expression of his beliefs. That's how he views it.
That's fine, and that's fine. To me, he has that right. I think he has that right. I'm not gonna, just because somebody wants me to say something on my YouTube channel because they believe in something doesn't mean I have to say it. I shouldn't be forced to say it. That's my business and my self-expression. How is it any different than his business and his self-expression?
So what do you think motivates somebody to just not say, okay, I'll walk 5 minutes down the road, fine? Like that's
Because two things. I think one, they want attention and they want the validation, right, from the world. Oh yes, you're doing human rights, you're doing good things for human rights and blah blah blah. But also, of course, they want to believe that they are a part of the change. The truth is, and I was having this conversation yesterday with somebody about trans rights, the gay community was making way more progress back like 10-15 years ago, when we were just like, we want to live amongst you, we don't want to be treated special, right? And now it's gotten to the point where we're all, not obviously not all of us, not me, most of us are wanting to be treated special, and then people have an issue with it, right? It's swung too far to the left, and now you have people using bug and bug self pronouns. And it's like, people are not on board with that, kid. Like, you can't do that. You can't force people to love you. It's just like not how it works. You have to internalize that and learn that, okay, if I'm trying to gain this love for myself from the outside world,
It's
that's not what love for yourself is.
it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. Yeah, I'd agree.
That's outside love. Does that make sense? I know I'm saying that a lot, but
no,
I say it, in my head it makes sense, and then I say it, and
no,
I script my videos, so I can't just like go off the cusp and just.
That's awesome. I have to get to a couple of videos. I didn't expect this, but you've done at least 2 videos that I saw recently about Jesus in particular, and I think this
Yeah.
is going to really interest my audience. You had one
Yeah.
on, was Jesus transgender or woke? Talk about
Yeah.
the point that you're making and why you hold it.
I think it was a few non-binary activists on TikTok, I believe. This was a few months ago, that were saying, "Oh, Jesus was non-binary because he was born of a virgin birth, which means he technically had no male chromosomes because he had no Y. You get the Y chromosome from your dad, but he was presenting male and presenting as a man, therefore he was non-binary." And other people were like, "Oh, he was non-binary because he had long hair and did feminine things like wash people's feet." And I'm like, get out! Like, stop making everything about being non-binary or gender, whatever. Jesus was literally, if he was real, we're just saying, he was a guy, an Israeli guy from the Middle East, who was very spiritually, actually woke, very conscious, very spiritually conscious, very sweet, very smart, very good natured, and he was very enlightened. And he wanted to spread that message to the world, and people thought he was crazy, and then they killed him. Like, that's the only important thing. It's not important that he was like non-binary and like wash people's feet. That's not the message that you're supposed to get from Jesus, in my opinion. You're supposed to get, this is how you love somebody. This man was good at it. Learn from it.
I mean, again, I would, of course, completely disagree with the new age spiritualizing of Jesus. It doesn't really work with what he would have believed in the first century as a Jew, especially. But also, I agree with her that these arguments, which are still appearing on TikTok, by the way, as someone who has a TikTok account, these arguments are still popping up, and they only get worse. There was one girl who was trying to say that God was transgender because um, our male God gave birth to the entire universe, and then said that if God has a uterus, but you're calling him male, he's transgender. And I'm just like, what? 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 That's not a good argument. Um, like, regardless of how you feel about trans people, that's just not a good argument. And even like Matt Dillahunty, who's an atheist, has said the same thing. Like, this is a terrible argument, and it it doesn't work. Um, but so it is nice though to see that someone agrees with that. I think that the reason though why people would want to make those argument in the first place is probably twofold. They probably want to stick it to the white Christian conservative or whatever, or just the Christian conservative. But I think the second reason too is because if the two most important beings or uh, yeah, if the two most important living beings in existence, that being God and Jesus, of course in Christianity we also have the Holy Spirit, but ignoring that for now to make the point, if they can be transgender or non-binary or whatever, which in my understanding transgender and non-binary aren't the same thing, but I don't know, I could be wrong, and someone please correct me if I am. um i- if those two beings that are of special significance can be trans, then I think that's like the ultimate way to validate yourself and to validate that community. But again, the arguments are terrible. But I don't know. I could be wrong here, but maybe the arguments are terrible because it's secondary to the point, which is that we're going to stick it to Christians and we are going to feel validated. Um, I really I think those two things would make sense. Obviously, that's not something I can necessarily prove, um, but it would make sense as to why these two things have explanatory power is my point. And the way that some of these videos are created, you definitely get the sense at the very least that they're trying to stick it to Christians. So
That's it. There's a whole book about it, but that's the main message throughout the book, right?
It is interesting to me. It says something about the significance of Jesus, at least culturally speaking, that
Hmm.
people feel the need to say, we're going to advance our movement by arguing that Jesus was non binary,
yeah,
Jesus was transgender. That's
Yeah.
behind it, right? They're just trying to make
I
a
mean, it's the most popular book in the world, right? Isn't the Bible still the most popular book in the world?
most commonly sold, most translated,
Right.
most,
Right. Right.
yeah, across the board. It's not even
Yeah.
close to a second one.
Right. So it makes sense that they're latching onto that. Like they already latched onto the gay movement, right? Because a lot of these non-binary people aren't even same-sex attracted. So they're latching onto different cultural movements, whether it's LGBT or Black Lives Matter or even like we were just talking about religious movements, or religious. You have to remember a lot of this woke stuff is like a new type of religion. So
Mm.
it's not the word of
mm,
God anymore. I call it the word of woke because that's what it is for these people. They don't have most people these days, Gen Z, a lot of them aren't religious and they need to find a purpose and they're falling into this moral superiority complex, which honestly is what a lot of religion is. Not that it should be, but a lot of it is, right? Like I guess specifically I would say Hasidic Judaism is kind of like that. Like they believe that, from what I understand, they believe that they are the chosen ones, right? That they're morally superior, that they're God's chosen people. I don't think that's healthy. And I think that's a similar mindset to the people that are involved with this woke, you know, this wokeness sweeping across the nation. Well, I guess not even sweeping across the world now.
interesting.
Canada, it's gone to the UK. Yeah,
It's interesting to hear you call it religion. John McWhorter has a
it
recent
is.
called woke racism. And his case is that there's certain prophets who speak for wokeism. There's
Mhm.
rights, rights, and practices. There's certain kind of sin that you cannot do. There's a way of
Yep.
gaining virtue in
Yep.
movement. And
Yep.
his argument is that it really functions like a religion, like he
It
says,
does.
especially as our culture gets less and less religious. Is that the heart of your
100%.
criticism of woke? Because I notice you have a few videos about this, or is there something else just about wokeism that just gives you pause?
Oh, that's definitely the majority of it.
Hmm.
The fact that it's acting like a religion and that it's controlling, it's trying to control people. It's trying to control people and it's abusive. That's the main issue. And the second issue is that it's a total lack of self-awareness, and it's putting it's putting the, what would the word be, the onus on everyone else to make you feel self-esteem and self-love and validation.
Yeah.
Everybody else has to appease me.
And they really don't. Like, the world does not revolve around you. No one has to care. um, not obviously, of course, you know, uh, love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? What I'm referring to is just kind of that, maybe the world generally, like, and even Christians could understand this too, but like, not everyone has to bow to your whims, and concerns and issues, and not everyone uh wants to, or in some cases needs to, um you know stop what they're doing to make sure that you feel validated, or you agree with them. If that's the case, then Christians can just take advantage of that. But obviously everyone would get mad if that was the case, and I think rightfully so. In their spreading of the gospel and stuff. And like I said, I think that's rightfully so. So um, I think that'd be a huge concern if Christians do it, and I think it's a huge concern if any big movement does that. So
And that's not something that I stand by. It's not a belief I stand by. I don't think it's healthy for anybody to live their life that way, to expect everybody else to cater to them.
So what are you trying to accomplish on your YouTube channel? You've done it 12 years. Obviously, there's a business angle to it, which is totally fine. If you invest your
Yeah,
time
of course.
into something, you should have a business angle to it. But is it educating people? Is it entertaining? Like, what are you hoping to accomplish through your YouTube channel?
I wouldn't say hoping. I think I am accomplishing it. And I don't mean that in like
Yeah, no, no,
that
no.
kind of way. It's like, no, I've been doing this for a long time. No, I think that my main goal has always been self-love. And when I see a lack of that, either in myself or in others or in a movement, I want to have conversations about that, because there is such a lack of love in this world at the moment. Such a lack of love for others and of love for a love for people, love for themselves.
definitely
That's always
agree.
been my message from the beginning, whether that was me talking about dating somebody or relationships or sexuality, and now culture, how you're supposed to interact with other people. All of it's about love. That's all that everything always comes down to.
Mm, fair, fair enough. Uh, do you find yourself, you've talked about, you have Catholic roots, you've done a couple videos on Jesus. Do you find yourself going back saying, I'm going to read the Gospels and explore what Jesus said, or you just feel like you have enough sense of what he believed that
I have
check
no.
that?
I took I read the Bible in like elementary school and junior high school, whatever it was, up until I was 12, and then I took a New Testament class in college. So I have read the New Testament. I don't remember much of it, but I did take a class, so I knew I studied it. I studied the Dead Sea Scrolls. So
Oh,
people want to hate on me and say, "You don't even read it." No, I did. I took a class in college. It was an elective. You
Mm,
need like 10 electives to graduate, whatever it was. So I was like, let me just to do something different, take a Bible class. But it was more of like a critique of the words, right? Not of like, you must believe in this. Um, Obviously, it was a private art school. It was more like, oh, what can we learn from this, and what is it, and was it the art of it too, right? Because he was writing,
mm,
and it was also all the Dead Sea Scrolls and the beautiful. I mean, you ever see them? They're gorgeous.
yeah,
yeah,
I actually just did a show
Yeah.
last week on an expert
Hmm.
on the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah,
something
beautiful.
I've explored, and I think it's super fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, all of those documents are just beautifully preserved. Well, a lot of them. And some of them got destroyed in Alexandria, like the old stuff. But um, what was the original question? Oh, what do I see myself looking back? I think I see myself becoming more and more spiritual, and if Jesus's statements and beliefs align with that, then I'll look into it more. But I don't think I look to Jesus for spirituality. I think I look into spirituality and different teachers like Deepak Chopra and Marianne Williamson, who ran for president recently. She didn't win, obviously, but she wasn't the candidate, but she was one of the nominees in the Democratic Party. And she's insanely spiritual. She's got a ton of great books to read. And then from that, I take what I believe in, and then I look at other religions, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of something similar, and maybe I relate to that. I think that's the way to do it. Like, you take a little from each thing because they're all very similar, right?
Mm.
At the core. Well, most of them. I
Yeah,
wouldn't say
I would
Islam is that
actually-
simple.
I would actually argue they're similar on the edges, but at the core, very, very different.
That's
Just
possible.
part of like whether there's a personal God or not. In Buddhism, there's not a personal monotheistic God. Judaism,
Right.
and Islam, there is.
True.
What to be human is hugely different in Buddhism versus in Christianity. What's wrong with the world? Obviously, in Buddhism, what's wrong with the world is, in a sense, that we have these desires, and desires create suffering. Eightfold Path alleviates it, but in Christianity, it's like the heart. In Islam, we're not submitted. So I think there's similarities with the teachings of Jesus and Buddha on the edges, but at the heart, there's huge differences about the kind of world we live in, the afterlife, what's wrong with the world.
That's true. Yeah. I've only dove into Catholicism and Buddhism, and I could say, I guess, yeah,
Okay.
you're right. I see what you're saying. Like, on the surface, I could see that they're very similar, but yeah, that makes sense to me. I haven't dove into any of the other.
Fair enough.
I mean, I grew up around Hasidic Jewish people, so I know their religion is nothing like mine.
Sure.
Just by the way they were acting, but which is interesting, right? Because it's like both followers of Jesus. So at the time, anyway, when I was a kid, and the interpretations were so ridiculously different. It's kind of funny. But that's the human experience. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised by that anymore. Everybody's going to experience things and take it in and push it back out differently based on their own life experiences or what they're told to believe.
So just some kind of final questions for you. Can Christians like myself, conservative, and someone like yourself, part of the LGBTQ community, can we be friends? And I guess I don't really mean you and me be friends. Can Christians and gay people who are not Christians be genuine friends, even if they differ on huge issues like the nature of marriage, and maybe even differ over what should be legal or not legal? Is that enough to divide, to say we can only be friends on, surface friends, or can there be real friendships across those differences? And if so, what would it take for that kind of friendship to take place?
I would say that's going to differ for everybody, unfortunately. For me, the line's drawn for everybody differently. For me, the line would be drawn at like the legal stuff, right? I mean, if somebody that were Christian were to say legally that they think gay people should be able to, go through conversion therapy still, I'd be like, it's proven not to work. Like, there's scientific evidence. It's just torture. Like, I don't agree with torturing people and legally being able to do so. So, like, I don't think I could be somebody's friend that believed in that. But if somebody was just like, I don't believe in gay marriage, I'd be like, good for you. Then don't get gay married. Like, that's it. That's all it has to be to me. When it becomes something that's physically, affecting somebody, and it's not just hurting my feelings, that's when I draw the line. Not that it would hurt my feelings, but it would hurt other people's feelings. That's when I would draw the line, I think.
Okay. What if it was something like, one of the difficulties with conversion therapy is so many things are thrown in this bucket. For example, like, I have a friend with same-sex attraction, married to a woman, and he says just counseling and prayer and certain spiritual disciplines just help me stay giving my affections and love towards my spouse.
Right.
Is that discipline okay? Because some would say, well, that's conversion therapy.
Well, it depends on what this person, like, is he putting himself in this situation, or is somebody forcing it upon him?
He's choosing to do it.
And that's fine. I don't have anything wrong with it.
They choose to do it. So
Yeah,
somebody would
that's all on
say, hey,
him.
we should have a law that prevents any Christian counselors from working with people who choose this voluntarily. You would probably put the line there and say, I'm not sure the government should overreach, even if I don't think they should live that way. I don't want the government overreaching in any area, telling somebody else how to live. That's where you would
Correct.
presume.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you want my personal opinion, I don't think that that's going to change your friend's same-sex attraction. I think it's either in you or not. Pun intended in this case. But I think if it to me, it sounds like he's more worried about cheating than having a same-sex attraction, right? He's more worried about acting on it than actually the idea of being same-sex attracted. Does that make sense?
Fine. Do you have any final questions just for me or thoughts? If you don't, that's totally fine. But anything that you're like, during this conversation, I'd be interested in asking Christian professor on anything.
Ooh, intriguing. You mentioned this earlier.
I don't have any questions at the moment. I guess a good question that my audience might enjoy is, what would you do if one of your kids came out to you as being gay?
Here's exactly what I would say. I would look at my son or daughter in the eyes and I would say, thank you so much for sharing with me. I can only imagine how much time and effort and probably fear it took to tell your dad. So the fact that in
Especially a
this moment
Christian
you're sharing
professor.
with me, thank you for trusting me with this. Know that I love you no matter what. That my love for you has nothing to do with what relationship you get into or don't get into. Your religious beliefs, any behavior, however you choose or end up just seeing yourself in this world, I love you and we are going to work through this together. That's exactly what I would say to my son or daughter if they
For
came.
me, that's perfect, honestly. That's it. I mean, what I think doesn't necessarily matter. It's your life. It's your kid's life. But I think because I have because I have an audience, my opinion does hold weight. And I think coming from that, I think I would say I'm very proud of you. I think that's a perfect way to handle it. I really do. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. Is sometimes there's so much Christians have assumptions, throw bombs at the LGBTQ community. It comes back, and there's not a lot of listening. There's not a lot of trying to find common ground amidst our differences, and frankly, just showing care and love for one another. And I got the impression you're willing to listen, open to things, and that maybe we could model this in a small way for both communities. So
I hope so. Yeah, I have a friend, Matthew Vines. His name is. He's
yeah,
you should look at. Oh, you know who he is?
we
If
had
not, you should look him up.
Matthew and I had an extensive public conversation about 2 or 3 years ago on the Bible and LGBTQ relationships.
And yeah, I interviewed him like 6-7 years ago when he first came out with his book. Was it God and the Gay Christian? I think it was
That's
called.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I interviewed him a long time ago. What a sweet man. So yeah, I was gonna say you should interview him if you haven't already. I'm glad you already found him, which makes sense because what is he, like the one of 5 people that do that kind of thing?
There's a growing few.
Yeah.
Matthew and I have we've built a friendship, even though we differ pretty significantly over what the Bible says. There's a mutual respect and care there.
Good.
So yeah, don't want to take any more of your time, but really appreciate you coming on. And before I finish up here, I want to say goodbye and thanks for coming on, but really appreciate it. And I guess last thing I'll say to my audience is if some of your audience comes and looks at my videos, they might be like, okay, time out, wait a minute, this guy's crazy. If my audience goes and looks at your video, they might think, oh my goodness, this lady's crazy. I would just ask people on both sides. I think we've shown a spirit of charity and willingness to listen to each other, positive conversation. Go check out the different YouTube channels, maybe with a different sense of openness than you had before. And that's a win if that happens. So
I love that. I think that's absolutely true.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Definitely. I would definitely agree with that. Honestly, this is one of the best discussions I have ever seen in relation to Christianity and the LGBTQ community, coming from a Christian professor at a Christian university and an LGBTQ YouTuber. Definitely go support both their channels. Go check them out and listen to both sides, as they said at the end of this video. The great conversation. I don't really have much to add. I think they kind of got through everything. Definitely go check her out. Check out her videos. I've watched a couple things. Very, very interesting. She's very open. Um, very open. So be ready for that. Uh, and check out Dr. Sean McDowell. I think he's a great Christian apologist. I think he's great in conversations. He's one of the best just speakers I have ever seen in my life. So, and his approach is something that I've definitely been trying to emulate. So, I hope it helps. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and follow me for more content like this. Thank you.